The job was simple. Watch the screens, walk the floor once at 3 a.m. The Hanlon Logistics Warehouse was a cathedral of silence after dark, its maze of 40-foot shelving units swallowing light and sound whole. My glass booth was an island in a sea of concrete and shadow. It began on a Tuesday, deep into the slow, dead hours. On monitor 7, which covered aisles 12 to 15, a package sat in the middle of the floor in aisle 14. A fallen box, I assumed, a lazy forklift operator's mistake. But at 2:55 a.m., as I sipped bitter coffee and watched, the box seemed to shift. Not a roll. A slight, deliberate rotation, as if correcting its angle to face the camera lens directly. A chill, sharp and sudden, went through me. This was my cue for the walk. I grabbed my heavy flashlight, its weight a small comfort. The air on the floor was cold and still, smelling of dust and stale cardboard. My footsteps were the only sound echoing into the darkness above. As I turned into aisle 14, my beam found the object. It was not a cardboard box. It was a wooden crate, small and coffin-like, its wood dark and grain raised with age. There were no labels, only deep gouged marks along its sides. It sat there, an anachronism on the sterile concrete. I didn't want to touch it. A rule from some deep part of my brain screamed not to, but protocol was protocol. I knelt, my knees popping in the silence. As my fingers brushed the rough, splintered wood, I heard it. The sound came from directly above at the very top of the shelving unit. It was the precise, dry sound of a fingernail, or something like it, tapping on metal. I jerked my light upward. The beam dissolved into the blackness, illuminating only the steel undersides of the highest shelves. "This is security. Identify yourself." My voice was swallowed by the sheer space, sounding thin and foolish. The tapping stopped. A new sound began, a slow, grating, like a heavy sack being dragged across the metal grating. Then a soft thud from the next aisle over. Then another, closer. It was moving. It was coming down. Fear, hot and liquid, shot through my veins. I abandoned the crate and backed away, my light darting wildly. I turned to sprint for the booth, and that's when I saw the lights. At the far north end of the warehouse, the motion-activated halogen banks of aisle 1 flared to life with a solid thunk. A heartbeat later, aisle 2 ignited. Then aisle 3. A sequential wave of illumination marching toward me down the 1,000-foot length of the building. Something was walking the aisle, something that tripped the sensors but moved just ahead of the light, keeping itself in the advancing edge of shadow. I ran. I didn't look back. The security door slammed behind me and I fumbled with the lock, my breath fogging the glass. Heart hammering, I spun to the monitors. The warehouse was now a blaze of artificial sun. Every single light was on. On monitor 7, aisle 14 was empty. The wooden crate was gone. But in the exact spot where it had lain, a pair of boots now stood. They were old, leatherwork boots, scuffed and stained with dried mud. They were placed neatly together, laces tucked in, pointing straight at the camera. At me. My resignation was on the supervisor's desk at dawn. He listened, face unreadable, then made 2 calls. Later he told me 2 things. First, the inventory system showed no record of a wooden crate, ever. Second, they'd reviewed the footage. "The lights came on just like you said," he told me, his voice oddly flat. "Every single one. But the cameras didn't see anything moving. The aisles were empty." "And the boots?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He looked away. "The timestamp shows they appeared at 3:07 a.m., but there's no frame of them being placed. 1 second the floor is clear, the next, they're just there." I never went back. But sometimes in the dead of night I think about those boots. Were they an offering, a warning, or a promise that the next watchman wouldn't be leaving when the sun came up? Would you like me to find more stories like the ones you shared, or perhaps help you analyze why that couple in Illinois was acting so strangely? My grandfather always said the night has a different weight to it. I never understood what he meant until I took the watchman job at the Viridian storage complex. The pay was good, the silence was absolute, and the rules were simple. Monitor the screens, and do a single physical check at 3 a.m. No exceptions. The complex was a sprawling beast of concrete and steel, with aisles so long, the motion sensor lights at the far end seemed to belong to another world. My kingdom was a glass booth lit by the ghostly blue glow of 16 security monitors. It was on the third Tuesday of the month when I first saw the package. On the screen for aisle 14, a lone, off-white cube sat perfectly centered on the concrete floor. It hadn't been there during the 2 a.m. camera sweep. My protocol was clear. Note it, retrieve it during the 3 a.m. walk. At 2:58 a.m. I entered the main floor. The air was colder than usual, carrying a scent like damp soil and old newspapers, a smell that didn't belong. As I approached aisle 14, my flashlight beam trembled slightly. The package wasn't a cardboard box. It was a parcel wrapped in thick yellowed paper, tied with a coarse brown twine. No label, no markings. A soft, rhythmic sound stopped me 3 paces away. It came from above, a sound like a wire brush being drawn slowly across metal. I pointed my light upward, but the beam seemed to die in the void above the third-level shelving, failing to reach the top where the sound originated. "Security on the floor," I called out, my voice tight. "Show yourself." The scratching stopped. A single small object, a rusty bolt, clattered down from the darkness, bouncing once on the concrete before rolling to a stop against the wrapped package. A chill locked my spine. This wasn't a prank. This was theater. I took a step back. As I did, a deep clunk echoed from the north end of the building. The halogen lights of aisle 1 burst to life. 2 seconds later, aisle 2 ignited. Then aisle 3. A visible wave of illumination, a domino effect of blazing white light, was marching down the length of the warehouse toward me. But the aisles between the pools of light remained pools of absolute black, and nothing crossed from the darkness into the light. The sensors were being triggered by something staying perfectly in the border between. I ran. I didn't look back. I hit the booth door, locked it, and stared at the bank of screens, gasping. Every light in the complex was now on. The warehouse was a landscape of blinding white and sharp, elongated shadows. On monitor 7, aisle 14 was empty. The wrapped package was gone, but in its place was a new object. A vintage portable rotary dial telephone, beige and dusty, its cord coiled neatly beside it. The receiver was off the hook, lying next to the base. As I watched, frozen, the phone on the monitor began to ring. The silencer was off on the booth's audio feed. A sharp, jarring brrring erupted from the speakers. It was the old-fashioned mechanical ring of a mid-century phone. It echoed through the empty booth. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, driven by a force I still don't understand, my hand moved. I reached for the talk button on the booth's intercom system, the one patched into the floor's audio. I pressed it. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice feeding directly into the warehouse PA. The ringing stopped. For a moment, there was only the hum of the monitors. Then, a sound came through the speaker, not from the booth's audio feed, but seeming to fill the booth itself. It was the sound of heavy, wet breathing, and 3 words spoken in a grating, whisper-thin voice that was not human. "Shift change, watchman." The line went dead. On the monitor, the phone and its cord were gone. The floor was empty. I quit that morning. The supervisor, a weary man named Harris, listened in silence. When I finished, he didn't call security or check footage. He simply opened a drawer and pulled out a faded handwritten logbook from the 1970s. He flipped to a marked page and pushed it across the desk. There, in 3 different handwritings from 3 different decades, were the same words. Incident. Aisle 14. Unscheduled delivery. Accepted by night watchman. Position now vacant. He closed the book. "You didn't answer the call, son," he said, not unkindly. "You just acknowledged it. The next guy, he might have to pick up." He offered me a severance and a non-disclosure agreement. I took both. But sometimes in the deepest part of the night, my own phone will ring with a number unavailable call. I never answer. I just listen and wonder who did and what aisle they're walking now. The Red Ledger. The severance pay from Viridian ran out after 6 months. The silence of my apartment was worse than the warehouses. It was a listening silence. I jumped at every wrong number call, every creak of the floorboards. I needed a job, any job, just to be around people in the light. That's how I ended up as the night clerk at the all-night motel, a faded V-shaped building on the old highway that curved around the city like a scar. It was the opposite of Viridian. Buzzing neon, the smell of cheap disinfectant and stale cigarettes, the occasional drunk or trucker passing through. It felt blessedly, mundanely real. My second week, a man checked in after midnight. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a suit that had been nice 20 years ago. He carried no luggage, only a battered leather briefcase. He didn't give a name, paying in cash for room 214, which faced the inner courtyard and the empty, glowing pool. His eyes, when they met mine, were the flat gray of a winter sky. He placed the briefcase on the counter to count the bills, and I saw a small, faded sticker on its side, a winged logo I recognized from my orientation packet at Viridian. It was the old corporate insignia for Hanlon Logistics, the company that had owned the warehouse. "Quiet shift?" he asked, his voice a dry rustle. He didn't smile. "Quiet enough," I said, pushing the key across the formica. He leaned in slightly. "You get used to the deliveries. It's the returns that are difficult." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Before I could speak, he took his key and walked into the dim hallway, his footsteps making no sound on the shabby carpet. I spent the next hour watching the security monitor for the second floor. The camera was a grainy fisheye, showing the empty hallway, the ice machine, the doors. The door to 214 stayed shut. At 3:17 a.m., the exit door at the end of the hall, which led to the exterior stairwell in the pool area, swung open. No one came in or out. It just opened, held for a full minute, and then slowly closed itself. My radio, used for maintenance requests, crackled to life. It emitted a burst of pure static, and then a voice, distant and mechanized, like a bad tape recording. "Request assistance. Poolside. Protocol." I had to check. I took the heavy master keyring and my flashlight, stepping out from behind the safety of the bulletproof glass. The courtyard air was warm and thick with chlorine. The pool's underwater light cast a sickly green glow, making the still water look solid. The man from 214 was standing at the deep end. He had changed into dark trousers and a white undershirt. The briefcase was open on a plastic lounge chair beside him. He was staring into the water. "Sir, everything all right?" I called, keeping my distance. "It's not deep enough," he said, not turning. "They always say that. The dimensions are never quite right for the return." "The return of what?" He finally looked at me. In the green light, his face was all sharp angles and deep shadows. "You left before your shift was over. They don't like that. It leaves a vacancy, an open ticket. Someone has to close it." He gestured to the water. "Sometimes they send the item to you. Sometimes you have to go to it." He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a ledger book. It was bound in a peculiar, slick red material. He opened it, and even from 10 feet away I could see the pages were not paper. They looked like vellum or skin. He flipped to a page, ran a finger down a column, and nodded. "Ah, here. Viridian Complex, aisle 14. 1 telephonic receipt. Status, accepted, unfulfilled. Custodian, J. Watchman." "That's you." He closed the book with a soft, fleshy thump. "An unfulfilled receipt creates a debt. The ledger must balance." The pool light flickered. In the strobing green darkness, the surface of the water bulged. Not with a ripple, but as if something large and rectangular was rising slowly from the bottom. The water sluiced off yellowed paper and coarse brown twine. It was the package from aisle 14. I didn't accept anything, I shouted, stepping back. You spoke, he said simply. You acknowledged the call. That's acceptance in their ledger. Now, the item must be returned to its point of origin. But the origin point moved when you ran, so it follows the custodian. He pointed to the now floating package. It's your return. You have to take it back. Take it back where? My voice was a whisper. The man from 214 smiled for the first time, a thin, ghastly stretching of lips. Where do you think? You have to finish your walk. You have to go back to the aisle. The pool lights died entirely, plunging us into near darkness, save for the faint neon from the motel sign. The floating package began to drift toward the edge of the pool, directly toward me. The sound from the warehouse shelves echoed softly from the deep end. I didn't run this time. Running had only brought it here, to this tawdry motel, to this green-tingled nightmare. The man watched, the red ledger held against his chest like a Bible. The package bumped softly against the pool's coping. The twine was loose, the wrapping parting. I knew what I would see inside before I looked. Not a phone, not boots. It would be the tool for the job, the key to finishing the walk. And I would have to take it because some shifts don't end at dawn. Some debts aren't paid with money. The night has a weight, my grandfather said. And now I understood. It was the weight of the thing in the water, waiting for me to claim it, so it could show me the way back to the aisle where my shift truly ended. The man from 214 took a small brass key from his pocket and placed it on top of the ledger. Your new key, he rasped. Room 214, the door is already open, the aisle is inside. I looked from his gray eyes to the key to the dark water. The choice, I realized, had been made the moment I pressed that intercom button. This was just the consequence, arriving at last. I reached for the key. The phone rang until it didn't. When the silence finally settled, it felt wrong. Too clean, like a room after furniture has been dragged out in a hurry. I waited for the familiar hum, the whisper of shelves counting themselves, the weight behind my eyes that meant the night was still working through me. None of it came. Morning moved on without asking permission. A family checked out at 8. A delivery truck idled by the ice machine. Someone complained about the coffee being weak. I smiled, nodded, did all the small human things I had forgotten were possible. Every so often my gaze drifted to the corner where the hallway to room 214 should have been. There was only a blank stretch of wall, painted over recently enough that the color didn't quite match. Around noon I found the ledger. It was in the lost and found drawer beneath the desk, tucked between a child's shoe and a cracked pair of sunglasses. Smaller now. Dry. The red cover had dulled to something like old leather. When I touched it, it did not recoil. I opened it. Most of the pages were blank. Not torn out. Unused. A handful near the front still held entries, but the ink was faded, as if embarrassed to be remembered. Names without faces, places that no longer existed. At the very back was a single fresh line, written in my own hand. Custodian, vacant. A chill passed through me, not fear this time, but possibility. I closed the book and pushed it back into the drawer. I didn't throw it away. Some things I suspected didn't appreciate being discarded. That night, I dreamed of aisles collapsing into sunlight, of shelves turning into trees, of boxes opening to reveal nothing at all. When I woke, the flashlight was gone. I searched the desk, the drawers, the supply closet. Nothing. For a brief, irrational moment, panic flared, until I realized something else was missing too. The wait. Days passed, then weeks. I quit the motel job. Got something boring and bright, an office with too many windows and a boss who talked too much. I stopped jumping at wrong number calls. I stopped listening for things that weren't there. Sometimes, though, I notice red ink. A stamp on a shipping box at the grocery store half scratched out. A ledger-style notebook in a stationery shop window. A man in a suit too old for him watching me from across a street, his eyes the color of winter sky. When that happens, I don't run. I don't answer. Because I know now how it works. The night is heavy, yes, but only if you agree to carry it. And somewhere, in a place that folds when you look directly at it, there is an aisle missing a custodian, shelves counting themselves in the dark, waiting for someone else to press a button they shouldn't. The phone will ring again, just not on my line. I sat down. The chair accepted my weight like it had been waiting, hydraulics sighing softly as if relieved. The desk lamp flickered, then steadied. The phone continued to ring, patient, insistent, the sound tunneling straight into the center of my skull. I did not answer it. Not yet. The man with the ledger watched me from the edge of the aisle, his reflection fractured across the darkened monitors. He did not rush me. He never rushed. That, I was beginning to understand, was part of the punishment. Urgency was for those who still believed time belonged to them. I looked at the open ticket on my screen. Active. Not reassigned, not replaced. Active. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The keys were worn smooth in the places my hands remembered without asking permission. A muscle twitched in my forearm, the old reflex to log in, to clear notifications, to make the red numbers go away. The phone rang again. I picked it up. "Viridian Night Operations," I said, and my voice slid into the script like it had never left. "This line is recorded for quality and compliance. State the nature of your delivery." Silence. Then breathing. Not human breathing. Too regular, too evenly spaced, like bellows, like machinery pretending it had lungs. "I have an item," the voice said at last. It sounded young and old at the same time, filtered through something granular. "I was told to bring it here. Do you have a manifest number?" "No." "That's a problem," I said automatically. "Items without manifests are subject to audit, hold, or—" "I don't want to keep it," the voice interrupted. "It keeps asking me questions." The flashlight in my hand grew warmer. "Where are you calling from?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, "Inside." The line went dead. The monitors around me flickered to life one by one. Camera feeds bloomed across the screens. Not just the warehouse, but places stitched together badly like mismatched organs. A school hallway lit by emergency lights. The inside of a city bus frozen mid-turn. A hospital supply closet with a door clawed from the inside. Each feed had a red timestamp in the corner. "Live delivery window." The man stepped closer. The ledger opened itself. "Your first return," he said. "Post-resumption items are always unstable." "I didn't agree to this," I said. "You acknowledged the system?" he replied. "Agreement is implied." I stood. The aisle lights brightened ahead of me, illuminating a new shelf that hadn't been there moments ago. Empty, labeled. Intake. Temporary. Something knocked from inside the nearest monitor. A dull, hollow sound, like knuckles against glass. "Protocol," the man reminded me. I swallowed and lifted the flashlight. The beam touched the monitor. The glass softened. Not cracked, softened. Like skin under pressure. The image warped. The bus interior stretching outward until the screen bulged, then split along a vertical seam. A hand pushed through. It was wrapped in plastic grocery bags, knotted tight around the wrist. The fingers were bruised purple, nails torn short. The hand clawed, scrabbled, dragging the rest of the body after it. A woman fell out onto the concrete, gasping. She looked no older than 25. Her hair was matted with something dark and sticky. Her eyes locked onto mine with the kind of focus reserved for drowning people who've spotted shore. "It followed me," she sobbed. "I didn't take anything. There was a sound and then—" She broke off as the shelves began to whisper again. Counts rose and fell like a tide. The man with the ledger did not look at her. He was watching me. Name? I asked her, forcing the words past my teeth. Lena, she said. Please. I don't know where this is. The bus. Everyone froze, and then the doors. Lena, I repeated, typing. Do you have the item with you? Her face went slack. Slowly, mechanically, she reached into her jacket and pulled something out. A small, rectangular box, cardboard, old tape, red ink smeared across the top in a symbol I recognized instantly, a partial Viridian stamp. I tried to leave it, she whispered. It screamed. The box vibrated in her hands. Set it on the intake shelf, I said. She hesitated. It won't let go, she said, panic rising. It knows my name. I stepped forward and took the box from her. It was warm. Inside, something shifted. The whispering shelves fell silent. I placed the box on the shelf. The label updated itself. Intake received. Custodian transferred. Lena collapsed to the floor, sobbing. The man finally looked at her. She's no longer your responsibility, he said. Do not form attachments. Where will she go? I asked. He closed the ledger. Processing, he said. The floor beneath her softened, turning translucent like the monitors had. She screamed once as she fell through, then vanished. The shelf sealed. I stood alone again. The phone rang. I answered. The calls did not stop. They came from everywhere and nowhere. Elevators that refused to open, basements that extended too far, stairwells that folded back on themselves. Each caller carried something, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. A man who found a filing cabinet in his bathroom that contained his childhood report cards, all graded in red ink he didn't recognize. A security guard who picked up a radio that whispered his own thoughts back to him, slightly out of sync. A teenager who downloaded an app that cataloged her dreams and then refused to delete itself. Every item came stamped, tagged, or marked in some way with Viridian's old insignia. Legacy assets, the ledger called them, residual contracts, forgotten clauses. And every time I took the item, logged it, shelved it, the aisle grew longer. The weight of the night pressed down on me until it felt physical, like a hand between my shoulder blades. Time stopped behaving normally. I ate when the system prompted me to eat, slept when my vision doubled. The desk chair reclined fully, transforming into something approximating a cot. I dreamed of shelves growing teeth. Sometimes I heard the warehouse before I saw it, the sound of movement too large for the space, of shelving units sliding without friction, of packages rearranging themselves when they thought no one was listening. The man with the ledger remained. He never slept. Sometimes I caught him watching me with something like curiosity. Once, when I dropped a manifest and swore under my breath, he tilted his head. Language degradation is common, he said. You are still acclimating. How long have you been here? I asked him. He paused. Since before Viridian, he said. Since before the name. Gus, what happens when the ledger balances? He smiled faintly. It never does. On what felt like the 20th night, or the 1000th, the flashlight flickered. The beam dimmed, pulsing weakly. I shook it, slapped the side. No change. The man noticed immediately. Your tool is degrading, he said. That is, unusual. What happens when it stops working? I asked. He did not answer. The phone rang again. I answered. This time the voice was familiar, my own. Hey, it said, breathless. I think I made a mistake. My stomach dropped. The monitor labeled Cam 01, Viridian Aisle 14. Flickered on. The image showed the warehouse as it had been the night I ran, and standing there, at the end of the aisle, was me. Not a reflection, not a recording. Me, sweaty, terrified, holding the phone to my ear. You have to tell me not to answer, the other me said urgently. Something's wrong. The shelves. The call cut. The man stepped closer. Temporal bleed, he murmured. The debt is circling. I stared at the screen. If I processed the item, logged it, Shelved it. I would be accepting myself. Closing the loop. What happens if I don't? I asked. For you? He said gently. Nothing good. The flashlight died. The warehouse lights went out. In the darkness, the shelves began to move, and from the intake shelf, something new began to breathe.